Hiring help for your podcast in 2026, what you must absolutely lock down. So imagine this. Your show finally starts to work. Downloads are climbing. Guests are saying yes faster. Your inbox fills with messages like, hey, I'd love to help with the editing, or I know someone who can produce this for you, or maybe I'll do it for free for now. Everything feels exciting until one quiet question shows up later. Who actually owns what here? If your podcast has volunteers, collaborators, editors, producers, or hired gun freelancers, this episode could save you from a mess you don't even see coming yet. Welcome back to Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and today we're talking about one of the biggest turning points in a podcast's life, hiring help. Because the moment someone else touches your show, you're no longer just a creator, you're also a manager. And if you want to have the growth to feel empowering and instead of stressful, there are a few things you absolutely must lock down. Now, let's start by acknowledging reality. Most of the podcast and creation teams out there are not employees. They're volunteers, they're friends, they're independent contractors, editors, producers. They're project-based hired guns, and that's totally normal. That's how most great podcasts are built. The risk isn't how people are paid. The risk is when the relationship isn't clearly defined. Here's the biggest mistake creators make in this area. They treat informal as safe. They assume that goodwill replaces clarity. They believe that volunteers don't care about rights, and they plan to sort things out later. Most conflicts don't start with bad intentions. They start with differing assumptions. So let's talk about how to avoid that without killing the vibe or turning your podcast into a corporate nightmare. First step, name the relationship honestly. A volunteer is not a co-owner, and an independent contractor is not a partner. A revenue share is not the same thing as co-ownership, and a friend helping out is still something your business needs to address. Clarity here protects everyone. When roles are named early, expectations stay reasonable, and reasonable expectations keep relationships intact. Quick reality check for you. If someone edits your audio, selects clips, or shapes the final episode, they may actually be creating copyrightable work, even if they're unpaid, even if they're doing you a favor, even if they say don't worry about it. You should worry about it. That's why the next step matters so much. Lock down the ownership before that work starts. Payment doesn't automatically transfer rights, and silence doesn't either. If you don't clearly say who owns the episodes, the edits, the clips, the artwork, the scripts, the derivative works, the law will fill in the blanks for you, and probably in a way you don't really like. It often does so in surprising ways. Clear ownership doesn't create conflict, it creates confidence. So now let's talk about volunteers specifically. These folks absolutely deserve respect. They deserve transparency. They deserve to know what they're contributing, what they're getting, what to expect, and what's expected of them, and also what they're not getting. Structure doesn't cheapen their volunteer work, it actually honors it. A short written agreement can prevent resentment later, especially if money or visibility enters into the picture. Now let's talk about independent editors and producers. These folks are professionals. They often work on multiple shows. They reuse workflows. They use powerful tools, including AI. That's fine, but what matters is that your show remains yours. So you need clarity around the scope of the work, the ownership of what's output, the confidentiality, what happens when the relationship ends. And yes, those AI tools, they need to be addressed explicitly. In this year, 2026 and onward, silence on AI just creates ambiguities. Can your editor use AI tools? Are they allowed? Can they train the tools on your content? Who owns the AI-assisted outputs? Sometimes that's a matter for the AI system's terms of use also. Clear permission beats assumptions every single time. So let me ask you something. If your editor were to quit tomorrow, would you have everything you need in place to safely and securely publish your next episode? Do you own everything that you need? Do you have the files, the passwords, the access, the rights? That question alone should tell you whether things are locked down or not. Now, here's another important piece that creators often skip. Plan for the end of the relationships, even when things are good. Most podcast relationships end quietly, not because something went wrong, but because projects evolve. People move on. You need clarity on things like removing access to systems and processes. You need file ownership and clarity on credit and how things are going to be used on a going forward basis, continuing obligations. All of this prevents awkward conversations later, or worse yet, recriminations later, and it protects everybody's goodwill. So, let me reframe all of this. It is not about control, it's about freedom. When expectations are clear, collaboration gets easier. When ownership is settled, growth feels lighter. When structure is in place, you can focus on creating instead of worrying. This is what I mean when I say lockdown and what it actually feels like. You can bring in help without fear. You can scale without renegotiating everything. You can sleep when someone else has access to your content, your systems, your channels, and so on. And you know, without a doubt, that your show is still yours. So if you're serious about building something that lasts, hiring well is not optional. It is foundational. And if you are serious about this, you need good, rock-solid contracts with all of your independent contractors, volunteers, editors, even your guests. You can find everything you need at podcastlawforms.com, where you can find the contracts you need, grab them with instructions and everything you'll need. Podcastlawforms.com. All of it is foundational. So next time, we're going to be talking and taking the next step. We'll talk about expanding beyond the show without chaos, without burnout, and without losing control, because teams are how podcasts grow, and structure is how growth stays manageable and even enjoyable. Till then, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, asking you to stay creative and stay legit. See you soon.